Golden State Media Concepts social media podcast. Time to hashtag everything. We talk about all the fun, crazy stories on social media. From Instagram to Facebook, Twitter to Tumblr, or probably even Friendster. Join us each week as we explore the quirky side of social media. It's the Golden State Media Concepts social media podcast.
It's simple, such a sad song. The one that we rely on to get us.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Social Media News Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Stacy, and it's very interesting in that I have a number of friends and coworkers who really like the TV show Seinfeld. I've tried to watch, I think like 2 episodes, and both times just was not a fan. I didn't quite get the humor or something. I think it didn't help that it's 90s, and so like the styling is very 90s, and the sets were just sort of for me, and I was like, what is this? And why did everyone like it so much? But especially my coworkers can just sort of quote Seinfeld things to each other, where they're like, oh, it's like when, you know, such and such a character did such and such a thing. So they would probably immediately have made this jump for this first story, in that I never would. In that people have been talking essentially about a plot for a Seinfeld episode coming true because a new mom failed a drug test because she had eaten a poppy seed bagel. I guess this was somewhere on the show. I don't know. So what had happened was on the day this woman went into labor, she had in that morning had a poppy seed bagel for breakfast, and then later failed a random drug test because I guess they do that for some people when they give birth or something. I can see why certain places, you know, would be like, oh, to protect the children. But also, wait, seriously? That seems really, I mean, who came up with that idea first to be like, let's random test, you know, women who've just given birth? I'm like, I've never given birth, but I kind of feel like you'd have to definitely, you know, double, triple check the way you're going to do that before you go about testing it. Because wouldn't everything in their body be all sorts of out of normal? They've just given birth. That's not like an everyday occurrence. But so anyways, because poppy seeds are from the poppy plant, which is used to make opium and therefore opioids, this came back as, you know, she's got drugs in her system. And so this was alerted to, I'm not sure if it's like Child Protective Services or something. She had to wait 5 days before, you know, she was given the sort of all clear of, yes, you can have your daughter and take your daughter home, because she failed this really random drug test through what was essentially a TV episode plot. And this has come up before a number of times with things from Seinfeld essentially seeming to come true, to the point that I'm kind of wondering, like, is it not because they were based off of real things? And again, not a Seinfeld fan, so I don't know all the back history behind it and, you know, who was involved in creating it and where they got their ideas. But like, for example, there was a news story in the past couple of months about how McDonald's, I believe it is, plans to sell muffin tops, just muffin tops, not the whole muffin, just the tops of muffins. And this evidently also was in a Seinfeld episode, because a lot of people mentioned that. But my first response was not, oh, Seinfeld, but rather, wait, didn't some company already do this? I thought I totally remember like being able to buy this for a very short amount of time when I was in college from somewhere, like not from a restaurant that would have like, you know, put it in a bag, from some processed package, some company like that. I'm like, didn't this didn't this already happen and like more recently than Seinfeld? Why is everyone like, oh my gosh, it's Seinfeld, it's TV coming to life? I'm like, but someone else totally also had this idea, and maybe they got it from Seinfeld. But I'm like, but it's not just McDonald's and Seinfeld. There was a, okay, Seinfeld, whatever. I guess I'm missing some major pop culture input or something. It feels like, actually, I don't even know if you could do this in a computer board, but like in a jigsaw puzzle, if you take out a piece in the middle, depending on the jigsaw puzzle and how many pieces and how big those pieces are, you can probably still, for the most part, tell what that picture is, but you could still see that part that's missing. It feels like that with a lot of things that, I was either just a bit too young for in the 90s and have just never decided to go back and watch, or B, things that I tried to watch and just didn't find entertaining that people just seem to reference all the time. Friends comes up a number of times too, and I'm just like, yeah, I never really watched that. So when you're talking about, oh, it's like that time on Friends when whatever, I'm like, yeah, sure, right, so, and then either change the topic or try and make it sound super philosophical so that the person's all thrown off by trying to make them talk deeper about what is essentially a, comedy TV show plot point. Yes, that is my master plan. That's how I get out of awkward. It's not. That's only happened a couple of times, but it was kind of funny to be like, so what do you think that means? Not in that sort of like, I'm your therapist sort of way, but in the, okay, but why would they do that? What would be the point of that? No, seriously, what would be the thinking behind that? And then let's go off on that tangent so we don't focus on the fact that I've never seen this TV show that it seems a good portion of people, even my age, have seen. Like, I get we all have the ability to go back and stream old shows, but why did we decide to? I'm like, but yeah, new movies and okay, but I have seen all of Gilmore Girls. I did totally go through and watch every episode of that, and that took a couple of years because Netflix did not have Gilmore Girls on streaming at the time, so I had to do the disc and wait for the disc to come back, and that took a while. But other than that, Gilmore Girls and Firefly, I'm just like, I don't really know that I can reference a lot of TV shows. My mother really does like NCIS, but only like to a certain thing. She doesn't like it when there was Kate. She only likes Ziva. Now that Ziva's gone, she doesn't like it as much. So within a small period of time, we can just sort of reference NCIS episodes to each other. And that's about as close as we get. Yeah. So we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Social Media News Podcast. Because this is a social media news podcast, we do often talk about things that are sort of trending or popular on social media sites, depending on when I happen to see them and when I record this podcast. But on other times, we sometimes talk about things, the social media things themselves. So we, for example, did talk about Facebook when they were going through all their legal troubles and having to go to Congress. We've talked about different features of social media sites and services that come, go, what have you. Lately, or I should say recently, there has been a lot of, I don't even know what quite to call it, but with people, famous people who get in trouble with a lot of organizations, including social media companies, that have been like, oh, you did something bad. Okay, this seems to be a systematic problem, so we're just going to completely cut this out. So this has come up most recently with Alex Jones. And Alex Jones is the person who runs InfoWars, which is a very divisive site that falls very heavily conservative in its political views and things it's saying, but also seems to a lot of people to be very, if not conspiracy theory, whatever, like the almost reverse would be of conspiracy theory, where rather than, or both actually, where rather than, you know, saying things without proof that, you know, thinking certain things happened that they didn't, which InfoWars does do, it also does say that things that did happen didn't, even though, you know, in this 21st century era of, we all have smartphones, so we can see this from multiple angles, including ones that, you know, I don't think we've yet gotten that good at being able to CGI fake that. You're going to deny that and or facts and or science? Okay. But irregardless of how you feel about his politics, he's currently dealing with some legal issues because he essentially claimed that the Sandy Hook shooting did not happen and that all the parents who were saying so were bad people lying for some reason. Currently in court about that. A lot of media source sites decided for numerous reasons, okay, not going to have him on anymore. So these are things like Apple on their iTunes podcasts, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, Stitcher, all removed most or all of the Alex Jones and or InfoWars stuff that they had on their services for various reasons were given for this. So for some, it was as part of their intention to curb fake news. Like, for example, on Facebook, which had the huge thing again with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which had targeted fake ads that ran during the presidential election that, you know, were specifically targeted to people who were likely to believe them, even though, you know, not supported by facts and were done at the behest of a foreign government. Facebook took a lot of heat for letting that happen, even though they're not the company who was actually doing that, because it happened on their site under their security setup. Facebook got blasted for that. And so they have since been trying to sort of rebuild up their image and to fight this issue of people essentially not only getting access to fake news on media, but essentially being able to form their own echo chambers with fake news where they only see news stories that agree with the views they already hold, regardless of whether or not those news stories are actually true. So Facebook definitely wanted to do this, amongst other things, because of the fake news things. But other reasons that were given included because Alex Jones had participated in hate speech and bullying. And he was also removed on some sites for glorifying violence and using dehumanizing language. So this sort of falls in line with the bullying thing. He's been at times vitriolic, I'll say, in his attacks on people for different reasons. The reasons he's attacking them, I mean, this is not just the parents of Sandy Hook victims, but it seems, and I do not watch his show or listen to most of his things, so the only clips I've seen of him have been from other sources that are themselves taking clips. He seems almost like those preachers who got really impassioned about something, but really impassioned to essentially stir up hatred. The things he's saying at times, it's like, even if you disagree with that that person or that group or that side or whatever, there were probably a number of ways you could have said that were not to the point of essentially that's not a human being. We don't have to treat them as one. It's just like, maybe my ideal of things is a little too of the child of, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It's like, I think you can disagree in a more let's not start stuff just to start stuff manner. But yeah, so this was a step that a lot of social media sites made, all in sort of not one fell swoop per se. It's not like they all got together and was like, okay, synchronize your watches, we'll do this at whatever time. This did sort of take place over a few days. You started hearing about the names. They came in, Apple and Facebook and YouTube, and then later LinkedIn, and then later Stitcher. So clearly it's of the moment right now, but it was not a sort of government run thing in that Alex Jones and or InfoWars is now illegal. That's not what the case was. The government didn't pass a law regarding this. These were the companies themselves deciding, in this era of everything's on the internet, and yet we don't know what to trust because you can easily fake things on the internet, including, as we saw when we talked about previously, Jordan Peele's fake Obama PSA, deep fakes now, even with video. It's like, okay, that's a video. That video could actually be fake. How do I trust anything anymore? Social media sites have been, held as you have a responsibility to do something about this. You can't just let this flourish unheeded. You are a major source of this, whether you want to or not. You should have at least some protocols in place to deal with this. A lot of them have tried to respond. Okay, we're going to have a plan to deal with this, to deal with fake news and all that. So this is clearly part of that new, aim to be, if not socially responsible, not socially irresponsible to the point where anyone with a, semi-decent computer and a good setup to publish things can just sort of claim anything they want, especially if it seems like it could have a large effect starting, I won't say like societal panics, but certainly having a large effect that can start a ball rolling that you perhaps couldn't necessarily control or call back in if you happen to feel remorse about that. Social media is taking a stand saying, no, we're going to be responsible about this to varying different levels. And now they've decided that this vitriolic, unproven thing that comes up on the various sites and podcasts that he had does not count as being responsible. So they're going to take it down. So we're going to take another short break. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Social Media News Podcast. I'm from California. I'm born and raised here and lived here most of my life, but it always throws me off when people who are not from California, and even depending on what part of California you're from, might not also know this, don't realize that me being in Northern California is like practically nowhere near Hollywood or Los Angeles, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of California. You know, you get that joke. My friends and I in high school used to talk about this. When you met people from different states or from different countries and you told them you're from California, and it's like, oh, you're like right near the beach, or you're right near Hollywood, or you could just, it's like, no, it's several hours drive, I think, to the beach. I don't really care for the beach, so I don't really go there. I've never been on a surfboard in my life. If you can imagine that, it's true. It is, if you're driving the speed limit, I think like 8 hours or so to LA, and longer if you actually do want to go along like the coast highway, but that'd be prettier. Going through the middle, you're going through a lot of like farmland, and that's just not as pretty. It's not terrible, but it's just like, but the beautiful coast, and depending on where you are, like the wonderful foggy forest, and it's like, yeah, but still hours of driving. To the point that when my family and I, when I was younger, went to Disneyland, we were originally going to drive, which I think is quite amazing of a idea on my family's part, because at the time I think I was 8 and my sister was maybe 6 or so. And I was like, you're going to drive 8+ hours with 2 children under 10? Good luck to that. But we ended up flying instead. Thank goodness. And on our way back, as we were going to LAX to fly back, we happened to see a celebrity. And I had never seen a celebrity before. And thankfully, this was a celebrity I actually could recognize. So maybe I had seen one before and just totally didn't know who they were, because again, I was 8. But we were at LAX and we happened to see Sinbad. And again, I was 8 at the time. So we knew Sinbad. My mother probably knew him from like House Party. My sister and I knew him from like First Kid, where he played the guy who protected the president's son and things like that. We definitely knew him more from the, kid side of things than the more grown-up side of things. But we were very excited when we saw him, and other people did notice who he was and, went up to ask for an autograph or whatever. We took a picture with him. And I think that is the only celebrity I've ever seen in person in my life. Again, unless they were someone I just wouldn't happen to know of, which still effectively doesn't count, because if I didn't know you, you were really just another Joe Schmo on the airplane or bus or restaurant or wherever we were. You were literally just like any other stranger, because I didn't know who you were. So even if you were a celebrity to other people, you weren't to me. So I didn't have that of a celebrity sort of moment. However, I do really like our final story today, which is that Keith Urban, the singer, was given some money as a, not even a favor, just a sort of kindness, because he was short on cash, by a woman who then turned to him and said, "You look a lot like Keith Urban." To which he's like, "Well, I am." So this happened at the convenience store Wawa. And I feel this must be one of those things that is only located in certain places, because I've never heard of Wawa. So I'm not sure we have them here in California. But this is Ruth Reed, who is a substitute teacher. For 3 years now, has had a resolution to treat someone at Wawa, excuse me. It's because her name is Ruth Reed and she has the 2 R's. I apologize. To treat someone at Wawa at least once a week. Sometimes more than once a week, but at least once a week if someone, doesn't have money or whatever to be able to give it to them. So she was in line and the man in front of her was trying to pay, but didn't seem to have enough money. He asked a different woman if she had money. So Ruth volunteered. She gave him money and explained, her resolution, what she did. And then was like, "Oh, you look a lot like Keith Urban." And it's just like, that is Keith Urban. Again, I don't know that I would have recognized Keith Urban in a store, but I can just kind of imagine if I had been one of those people who had known who he was and had been there at the time. I was like, are you serious? This feels kind of like I'm in a movie where the person doesn't recognize the person they totally just said you look like. It's just like, that is actually them. That is the real person. That's not a lookalike. That's not an actor. That's not a fake. That is the real, enter whoever. In this case, Keith Urban. He just sort of responded and said, "I am." And at first, she evidently did not believe him, because he was with a woman, but was not, I think, his wife, who I guess the Ruth Reed also knew who his wife was. And so it was like, you're not Keith Urban because that's not your wife. That ended up actually being his sister. And when Miss Reed said she didn't believe him, he's like, well, there's my bodyguard. You can ask my bodyguard if you don't believe me. And she did evidently ask the bodyguard, and I was like, yeah, that's Keith Urban. And so he actually allowed her to take a picture with him to sort of cement the moment of both, hey, you helped me out, and also you totally didn't think I am who I am. It's not clear why he needed help paying for things at the time. He was evidently in the area for a concert and stopped at the convenience store, I guess, because he needed some stuff, but then didn't have enough to pay for it because it's not clear why. As of this recording, he has not made an official comment regarding this incident. And I almost feel bad saying incident because that makes it sound like all negative. And it's like, that would actually be kind of one of those stories you know, might tell your grandchildren. Remember, did I ever tell you about that time I met a celebrity and totally didn't know who he was, but gave him money? I don't know why I said that. But anyways, it's a very sweet photo. He's smiling in it. She's smiling in it. She sounds like a wonderful person to not only help out a stranger who seems to be short on cash, which some people can do just randomly. I've had it a couple of times when I was younger, so not technically for me, for my mother, where people have bought her gas at gas stations, including one time, which was so sweet. She went in to pay, but said the wrong pump number and actually gave the pump number of the person who was in line behind her. So when he came up, he essentially told the the cashier, okay, here's, I can't remember if it was $20 or $40 or whatever. Here's whatever for that lady because she gave the wrong number. So she's going to come back in here and correct that. Please put this on whatever pump she happens to be on. And I'm just like, I love people who do that, not because they expect anything in return, but are just because, you know, it's nice to be nice, I guess. So to have a resolution of, I am going to once a week help out somebody who needs it at this store, and then to keep that resolution for a number of years, it's like, you deserve, at minimum, yes, a photo with a real celebrity, but certainly much more than that, because it does often seem there are not enough nice people in the world. So it is very nice to hear of events where there are. And on that note, we're going to end for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Social Media News Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Social Media Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.